Okay, so I'm going to respond to a couple comments again. So hang on. Actually, gonna look at something. Also, I managed to get rid of the adverts. There were annoying ads appearing on some of my videos, but managed to get into the desktop site and then disable the adverts. So thanks to, I think it was Ben that told me how to do that, so cheers for that. I should have probably done it sooner, but I'm not very good with these things. So Kate says, thank you so much for your heartfelt replies. I don't want to take too much of your time or your comment space, but I had another question. Do you do one-to-one and private conversations? Yeah, just send me an email. I think my email is in the channel description on the main page, I think. I'll double check. Happy to do that, but my question is, yes, I've been doing a lot of non-dual inquiry with regard to the census in the last couple of years. I think this writing's very small, hang on. I think sometimes in my walks, bam, all of a sudden everything opens up and I'm flooded with a profound sense of gratitude and recognition of beauty, etc., etc. And what comes up is a thought that says, as you pointed out, oh God, this is too much, I can't sustain this. So yes, there is still some belief there is someone here that has to maintain joy, or there is still a belief that there is someone here who's done something wrong, and therefore that's why this perpetual state of awe and gratitude is not seemingly present all the time. There's so much, as you say, meaning and being right now, and it drives me nuts, even though there's no one to be driven nuts. And of course it's only driving me nuts when it appears to be that way, which is not all the time. But yeah, you don't have to worry about there not being anyone to drive nuts, because I mean that's a point of view, a position, or a belief, and it's just that things like that are only relevant from a point of view or as a belief held by a self. That's why I'm not a huge fan of the radical non-dual thing, because it's too easy to adopt that as a belief, or get yourself down about it because you feel like you're a self. Yet that self believes there is no self. Just watching this cat hunting. Completely in the zone. Sorry. It's sort of built up this resistance to life, and it's like resistance to life because it's like hanging on, waiting for that to open up, and I'm saying no to life. Not right now, I'm too busy. I'm too busy waiting on something. Yeah, so this seems to be, again, this half in, half out experience, and it seems like that because what has become clear in experience, like you said, when everything seems to open up, is timeless. It's not contingent on a point of view. It's not contingent on a character who is experiencing that as an objective quality, as an experience. But at the same time, the remnants of, or the pattern, the playing out of this habitual pattern, this function of self, of relating to experience from a position, continues out of habit, force and momentum. And that constructs, it seems to construct on top of that simple experience of awakeness, of aliveness, of presence. It seems to construct on top of that a narrative about me and how I relate to it. That very narrative is made of thought. Thought is made of the exact same substance, you could say, of that realization, of what was realized, of that simple recognition of knowingness, of presence, of beingness. So as those patterns play out, with that recognition, as the patterns play out again and across a relative timeline, they start to disintegrate in their reality. They become less the experience of subject and object, of me relating to my idea about my experience of presence, and then the seeming obscuring of that through all this mess of thought. The solidity of that subject, of that thought experience as something real, just kind of starts to disintegrate over time, and it's a process that in the relative takes time, but at the absolute level time isn't even a thing. It's the whole thing is done already. It's quite strange that I often point to this absolute reality, what is realized, talking about this whole awakening thing. It's very strange the way I talk about it, because I always point back to that which is already here. The awakening's already done. There's no such thing as enlightenment. There's no such thing as unenlightenment. There's no such thing as the relative character. But from that point of view, with belief in reality, it sure feels like that. It sure seems like that, and it takes a bit of time for that to deconstruct itself. It doesn't all just happen at once. The realization is absolute. So what you experienced when you said that everything opened up, then that's here right now. That is the thoughts that are appearing. That is the story of the character that's appearing. There isn't actually a back and forth. None of that's really happening at the ultimate level, and that just becomes more and more clear over time. But your clarity on it seems good, and just that this is being noticed, let's say, apparently by the character, just that this is being noticed, and that you're aware of it, aware of the thoughts appearing, aware of the fiction of this story of me, means that it's just going to disintegrate over time. What you can't explain, so what you kind of tried to explain there about that feeling of recognition, that awakening that I always talk about. I always say once that's tasted, and that it becomes more real, obviously more real than the experience of the character. So once that's tasted, and once you have tasted that, once you've had that glimpse, then you know it's always here. You know it's not in the future, really. There might be some belief still there, but intuitively you know it's not in the future. It's right here, and you have access to it right now. In fact, you don't even need access to it because you are it. Then it's just about orienting towards or as that. And we do that by, let's say, embodying what was realised, and from that non-position, recognising when these stories about a subjective character and its subjective experience appear, and that's enough. That's enough. It can go through a phase where it gets really uncomfortable, because you don't believe you've experienced something, let's say, that's more real than that story of my life, the character, which has been your identity, your experience of yourself all the way up until this, let's say, badly worded, this awakening happens, or from other end unhappens. Something that is clearly more real. You've experienced something, and you've experienced yourself as something more real than the character and the stories and the meing and so on, or the selfing, or whatever you want to call it. But yet there are still beliefs there. There are still habitual patterns there that play out and keep happening, even though, you know, at a deep level you don't believe in it anymore, and that can be uncomfortable. But it kind of helps to know that that's just going to happen, and there's no you that's in control of it. You don't have to worry about there not being a you that's in control of it as a thought experience, but that you're not in control of that. It just happens on its own. The thoughts appear out of nowhere without an agent who's there creating it, who can control thought and then generate this experience. It's clearly not like that. So again, it's like you're off the hook with it. It doesn't mean that there doesn't have to be, or doesn't need to be, some sort of practice in the relative where we remain attentive to these narratives coming up, and we don't actively try and get lost in them. But there comes a point where what was tasted is clearly more real than these stories, and that's enough. Just feeling that, embodying that, knowing that, and then being attentive but at the same time relaxed, knowing that's enough. Then these, every time the pattern plays out, in a way it disproves itself as something real, and it just gets less and less real. I always think it's a great idea to find something that's more interesting than the thought, or this idea of a journey or a practice or a progression. So like something immediate that you can enjoy, get involved in, like a hobby or a pastime or whatever that you enjoy just for the sake of doing that, and then put all of your attention into that as your kind of primary activity that you're doing. So for me it was walking. For me it was walking, and it kind of bypasses that struggling with the thinker, that resisting the thought, or the whole kind of seeking experience, because there's something more engaging and interesting than sitting in the head struggling with thought, if that makes sense. I'm gonna have to go for a wee minute, but I'll come back in a sec. Okay, so part 2 of this video, 24 hours later, because I ran out of time. Okay, so So AK11020 says, "Thank you, David, for taking the time to respond and provide further insights and clarifications. This whole process of seeking is so tiring and futile. Tripping on the same rocks, on the same sodden path over and over again." So I don't know if I could honestly say, in my experience, I don't think I could say it's futile. Certainly from one point of view, or you could say the non-point of view of the absolute, you could say it is futile. It leads nowhere. Or you could say it leads to where you already are. But I do feel that as part of this process, it is part of this process, and it happens the way it needs to. And I think there is value in that whole thing, in the confusion, in the uncomfortableness, and the frustration. I think that's all part of it. Again, that's just a point of view from my own experience, but I do get the sense that it is part of it. It happens as part of this, and there is value in it, at some level at least anyway, even if it is really uncomfortable and frustrating. So back to the comment. "Having said this, your teachings do have a grounding effect, and I'm so appreciative of that. Resting in the not knowing is the invitation, and perhaps the weariness will leave no choice for the choiceless. I have a feeling that the desire to know is the veil to what has always been in plain sight. Thank you and much love." So I think you definitely have a knack for describing this, or the way you're using language is effective, I think. So I don't know if you would. I know it's not relevant, but I don't know if you would describe yourself as having had an awakening. I know from, let's say, Limits the Language, the point of view of what we are talking about here, that doesn't make any sense. But I mean, it's clear from your comment that you can feel it, and there's that resonance there with what I'm pointing to, that it's not just conceptual, not just in language. And I always say that that's the whole thing. That's all of it. That's all of it. That direct, felt sense of whatever this is, an immediacy, transcendent of and inclusive of the conceptual mind. Yeah, and any grounding effect, or well, I know I've explained this before, but I don't consider myself to be someone who has a teaching. Any kind of grounding effect or sense of resonance or clarity that is felt by whoever's watching these videos, I certainly wouldn't ever suggest it has anything to do with a specific teaching or this character here. Of course, because anything that you are feeling from this apparent character, talking from this direct experience, is you could say, or like me and you stop making sense at that point. But once these words aren't like, it's like this filter of the objective, the conceptual mind. The words are like caught by this filter and turned into concepts. Once the words have the chance, or whatever has a chance to pass through that barrier of the conceptual mind, of the character, then what's happening here is happening, let's say, at a different level, I guess you could say, so to speak, a deeper level. And what's being felt is nothing to do with the character of you and me. What's being felt is I always say something like, what's happening is that reality, you and me, is talking itself through this awakening process, is talking to itself and clarifying itself. And that, whatever that is that we are essentially, is entirely transcendent of the separate characters. So these words being heard by apparently you, are you, this sound is you, this image that you see, this apparent separate character is appearing as you, is appearing as more you than the idea of you that's somehow back here and behind the eyes and the head. So it's like you're, whatever you are, whatever we are, you're talking to yourself. Any clarification that's gained from an apparent teaching or whatever is given to you by yourself, is seeming, including the words, including the characters, but seemingly transcendent of both. But you can feel it, and I would say you can taste it, and once you've tasted it, once you feel it, and it's familiar in that deep intuitive sense, then it's just that's it, that's the whole thing, and that's the whole awakening done. And then in the relative, these layers of self or identification just start to unravel and fall away. But the actual insight, the recognition, the realization is transcendent of that whole narrative, but also doesn't exclude it, I would say. But anyway, I need to go now. That'll do for this one, and I'll talk to you next time.